Welcome to this short for the AWS Developer Certification. Today we will be discussing a question around app sign-in and development. So let's dive right into the question. So for the question today, a developer is adding sign-up and sign-in functionality to an application. The application must make an API call to custom analytics solutions to log user sign-in events. Which combination of the two actions should the developer perform to meet these requirements? So for the option A is to use Cognito to provide the sign-up and sign-in functionality. B is use the AWS Identity and Access Management, IAM, to provide the sign-up and sign-in functionality. C is to configure an AWS config rule to make the API call when the user is authenticated. D is to invoke an Amazon API gateway method to make the API call when the user is authenticated. And E is to invoke an AWS Lambda function to make the API call when the user is authenticated. So take a second here to see if you know the answer. And let's take a look at keywords and the correct answers. So for the keywords that we're looking at here is you need to know what Amazon Cognito is, IAM, AWS config, API gateway, and Lambda. And don't worry, we'll touch on these in case you're not familiar with them. But the correct answers are actually A and E combined together. You would have to use the combination of the both of them. So using Cognito would provide the sign up and sign in functionality that you need, and using Lambda function to make the API call once the user is authenticated. So let's take a look at those keywords this time and drill a little bit deeper into them. So you likely already know what IAM is. It's used to mostly authenticate AWS resources. Cognito is used to authenticate users in a resource pool. So you have a pool of users, and you have to identify if this person has the right credentials to be inside that pool and access those resources. Lambda you are familiar with. API gateway you're likely already familiar with is the way to handle web requests for your apps. Now AWS config you may or may not be familiar with, so we're going to point it out real quick. Config is used to audit and configure resources on-prem and in the cloud. It's more used to assess if your configurations are meeting the requirements outlined by your parameters. So let's dive into the correct answers. We already touched on this, why these two are the best options available for you. Cognito already has your sign up and sign in functionality that you need, and the Lambda function allows you to take the actions that you need once you are authenticated. Let's look at some of the answers that were there that we didn't select there. So the first one is using IAM to provide the sign up and sign in functionality. You use IAM mostly to authenticate resources that you have, so that's why this is not the best option that you have from those available. AWS config we already talked about is used more for assessing the configuration of your resources and less around authorizing your access to those resources. And the last one, to invoke API gateway method, although this is combined with authentication, doesn't actually do the process work like the Lambda does. So that's why this option wasn't chosen. So the last thing that we want to touch on for this short is Cognito itself. If you're not familiar with Cognito, it's a great opportunity to go through it. I have on the screen some of the uses that you may get from using Cognito itself. I have a short demo to walk you through on creating a new user pool. A user pool is a set of users that authenticate to your application. So all the registered users that have permission to use your application. Let's take a look at how to set one up. I'm now going to walk you through how to create a new Cognito user pool. So with the page pulled up, go ahead and click on the button. We're going to be using for the authentication model, we're going to be using email. So we leave username and phone number blank. We're going to use a user pool that's already selected. So let's go ahead and make sure everything looks right, and click on next. We're going to leave the default password settings there. And looking at multi-factor authentication, we're going to not use MFA for this example. So go ahead and click on that. And then leave the default user account recovery settings. We will allow enable self-registration. Leave the default for Cognito verification set up. For any verifying attribute changes, we'll leave to email as well. We're not going to add any additional required attributes at this time. So scroll down and hit next. And then we're going to use SES as our email provider. Go ahead and you'll need to make sure that you have a whitelisted from address selected here. And we're not going to choose any configuration set or any of the other defaults that are optional. Give your user pool a name. We're going to use this, for this we're going to use the Cognito hosted UI. For the app client, we need to give the app client a name. We're not going to generate a secret at this time. We're going to put in a fake URL for the callback URL just for this test. Hit next. Oh, it looks like I made a mistake somewhere. Let me scroll up and take a look. I forgot to put the Cognito domain in there, so go ahead and enter that real quick. Hit next. Review that everything looks correct. And create user pool. It may take a little bit to set up, but you're all ready to go. And that's how you create a new user pool in Cognito. Thank you for watching the short to the end. We appreciate you sitting it out with us. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below so we know to get back to you. And we're happy to hear from you next time. Please check out our other videos as well.